You know, when you think about how a city is run, it can feel like a complete mess, right? A jumble of unpredictable rules where what you can build seems to depend more on your zip code than any real clear logic. But what if we could just replace all that chaos? What if we could install a clean, logical operating system for a city? A universal code base that defines how every single part of it grows, works, and actually thrives.
Okay, so here's the plan. We're going to start with the new code itself and why it's even needed. Then we'll get into the city's hardware, its infrastructure. After that, we'll look at the core rules of the system, see how that code translates into actual places, and then wrap it all up with the hard boundaries that keep the whole thing in check.
All right, first up, the city's new code. This whole thing is about solving one massive problem. How do we get urban planning out of this endless cycle of subjective, case-by-case negotiation and into a world of clear, objective rules that everyone can follow? In this slide, wow, this just lays it all out. On the left, you've got the old way, what we can call the postcode lottery. We're talking over 1,000 different zones, often inconsistent, almost always subjective. And on the right, the new way, a universal code base. It boils all that complexity down to maybe 13 to 20 zones. For anyone trying to make decisions, this is a total game changer. It creates what's called a culture of adherence. The new question isn't who do I know, it's do I meet the code? It's all about predictability.
Okay, moving on to Section 2. Now, any good operating system needs some powerful hardware to run on, right? Well, for a city, that hardware is its infrastructure. The streets, the transit, the pipes, and this new code is built right on top of that physical foundation.
At the very heart of this whole infrastructure-first idea is this incredibly simple but powerful mantra: density follows frequency. What that means is the system legally connects how much you can build directly to how good the public transit is in that exact spot. This is so smart because it stops developers from building huge projects in places with no services, and it makes sure we get the most bang for our buck from public investments.
And here's exactly how that mantra becomes law. Look at that top row. If you're near major rapid transit, there's a minimum building height of 6 stories, no question. And see that key design feature? Hard shell, soft core? That just means using smart design like acoustic glazing on the outside to create quiet, peaceful courtyards on the inside. Then step down to a frequent bus route, and the minimum is 3 stories with a requirement for connected soil volumes. That's basically a fancy way of saying we need to make sure our street trees have enough soil to actually grow and thrive. So we've got the hardware sorted. Now let's look at the software. The 3 core principles that really govern how this entire system works. Think of these as the fundamental rules of the code.
First up is something called inclusive zoning, and the best way to think about it is like a set of Russian dolls. The biggest doll, the highest density zone, automatically allows everything that's permitted in the medium density zones, and those, in turn, allow everything from the low density zones. Why does this matter? It means you can always have a corner store, or a cafe, or a small office in a high-rise neighborhood. It builds complete, walkable communities by default.
Next, we have the right to operate. This is absolutely crucial for protecting the city's economic engines. It basically shields existing businesses, think factories, workshops, music venues, from complaints from new residents who choose to move in next door. It stops gentrification from accidentally killing the very things that make a neighborhood vibrant and functional in the first place.
And the third rule is the newcomer principle. It's so simple and so fair. Whoever makes a change is responsible for dealing with the side effects. So if you decide to build new apartments right next to a loud 24/7 port, you, the developer, have to pay for the soundproofing. The port doesn't have to change. It puts the cost of managing change on the person making the change.
Okay, so we have all this elegant code, but what does it actually look like in the real world? Let's dive into the user interface, the actual zones you'd see on a map that shape the places where we live, work, and play.
And here is that Russian doll model in action. You can see how the system builds complete neighborhoods from the ground up. You start with a base layer of quiet, low-rise homes. Then, the next zone adds permissions for things like corner stores, creating the building blocks of a 15-minute city. As you move up to mid and high-rise zones, you add bigger retail, then eventually things like hospitals and universities. Each step adds a new layer of possibility without taking away what was there before.
The industrial side of things is just as logical. It creates this really clear gradient. You've got quasi-industrial zones that act as a buffer where housing and light industry can mix. Then you have the industrial zone, which is described as a workforce habitat, a place where factories and housing for the people who work there can exist side by side. And then you have the real powerhouse,
Which brings us to the exclusively industrial zone. This is the city's engine room.
Think heavy industry, 24/7 ports, major rail yards. And to protect its right to operate, certain things are strictly prohibited. You can't build homes, schools, or hospitals here. It's a hard firewall designed to prevent conflict before it even has a chance to start.
The system also brings this same clarity out to the countryside. It protects the rural economy with a rural production zone, where large-scale farming is the priority, and smaller lifestyle blocks are prohibited. But it doesn't ignore the demand for countryside living. It just channels it into a specific rural residential zone. This zone acts like a container, preventing that sprawling development from chewing up productive farmland elsewhere.
Okay, for our final section, let's talk about the system's firewalls, because no operating system is safe without them. And in this urban code, there are some absolutely non-negotiable boundaries for managing growth and ensuring public safety.
So, to manage growth, the system uses what's called an Urbanization Promoting Area, or UPA. Think of this as the city's designated growth reservoir. This is where the city puts its infrastructure-first policy into action, actively investing in the streets, pipes, and parks needed to support new communities over the next 10 years.
And the flip side of that coin is the Urbanization Control Area, or UCA. This acts as the dam walls against sprawl. Here, new urban development is basically prohibited. And the mechanism is brilliant. These areas are low priority for infrastructure spending. By restricting the money for new services, the city creates a powerful financial and physical barrier to unplanned growth. Now, let's talk about a few universal rules that apply absolutely everywhere, from the busiest downtown street to the quietest suburban cul-de-sac. It's called the 330-300 rule for public health, and it starts with a beautifully simple idea. You should be able to see at least 3 trees from every single home. The 30 in the rule stands for 30% tree canopy cover. This means that when you look at any neighborhood from above, at least 30% of it should be covered by trees. And this isn't just about making things look nice. It's critical for cooling our cities, managing stormwater, and cleaning the air we breathe. And the final piece, the 300, means that every single building must be within a 300-meter walk of a public green space, a park, a square, a little pocket park. Altogether, these 3 rules treat nature as a green utility, something as essential and non-negotiable as water or electricity. And finally, we have the ultimate firewall, the red line policy. This is a non-negotiable rule to avoid hazards. It uses climate science to look a century into the future, to the year 2126, and it draws a hard red line around any area that's considered very high risk. Inside that line, development is simply prohibited, period. It's about having the foresight to stop building our communities in harm's way.
So this universal code offers this incredibly logical, predictable, and efficient way to manage how our cities grow. It's a shift from a messy lottery to a clear operating system. But it leaves us with one big question to think about. What are the trade-offs? When we create a system that's all about adherence to a clear code, what do we lose? What happens to the nuance, the creativity, or the unique solutions that can sometimes emerge from a good old-fashioned negotiation? That's a question every city embracing this kind of change will have to grapple with.